Welcome back to the lesson. In this video, we're going to be discussing about for loop in Python. A for loop is used for iterating over a sequence such as list, tuples, dictionary, set, and strings. And with a for loop, we can execute a set of statements once for each item in a list, tuple, set, etc. For example, let's go ahead and print each fruit from inside our fruit list right here that we have already defined beforehand. So let's go ahead and use for loop to iterate through our list items right here and print each fruit inside of our fruit list. So let's go ahead and do that. Now to use for loop, we're going to go ahead and use the for keyword for x in fruit. Something like this. And we're going to go ahead and say print x. Alright, so this is basically how we define the for loop. We use the for keyword followed by our iterator right here, and then we use one of the membership operators in fruit. So now each element inside of our list right here will be presented with the x, which is our iterator, and then after that we went ahead to print our x right here. So now let's go ahead and run our script. As you can see, we're gonna have apple, banana, orange. So with our for loop, we went ahead to iterate over our sequence right here, which is our fruit. And as you can see, the for loop does not require an indexing variable to set beforehand. All we need to do is define our iterator right here, which is x, immediately after our for loop. And then after that, we specified our condition right here. So we can as well use the for loop with tuples, dictionary, and set. So let's actually go ahead and change our fruit to a tuple. So let's go ahead and use round bracket like so instead of square bracket for list. So let's go ahead and say something like this. Now this is a tuple, and now if you go ahead and run our script, you're gonna see we get exact same result. Same way we can change it into a set using curly brackets, something like this, like so. And if we go ahead and run our script, as you can see, we iterate through a set as well: orange, apple, and banana. Alright, let's actually go ahead and change back to a list. Alright, something like this, a list. And we can as well go ahead and loop through a string. Remember, we've discussed about string being an array, that we can go ahead and loop through the sequences of characters within our string. So let's actually go ahead and do that. Now instead of using our fruit, let's go ahead and define a string called pineapple. Okay, something like this. And now we are looping through our string. So as you can see, for x in pineapple, so each characters inside of our string right here, pineapple, will be represented with x. And now if you go ahead and print x, we're gonna get all the characters inside of our string here, pineapple. So let's go ahead and run our script. Alright, as you can see, we have printed our pineapple, P-I-N-E, and so forth. Alright, and we can as well go ahead and use the break statement that we've used for the while loop in our previous lessons. We can go ahead and use it for the for loop as well. So let's go ahead and try that as well. Now, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and change this back to fruit, to our list, fruits. And then we're going to go ahead and come down here and use the if statement. If x is equals to, let's say, banana, something like this. Alright, now let's go ahead and define our break statement. Let's go ahead and say break. Alright, so now when x is banana, we go ahead and break out of our loop. We exit the loop. So let's go ahead and now, first of all, comment this line of code. Let me run the script first. As you can see, we have apple, banana, and cherry. So with our break statement right here, when x is banana, we said we wanted to exit the for loop. So now we're going to get apple and only banana, but orange will not be printed because we already exit out of the loop before reaching the orange. So let's actually go ahead and run our script. We're going to get apple and banana only. And we can as well use our print statement right here after our condition. Let's go ahead and cut this after our break condition. Let's go ahead and paste this right here. And now if I go ahead and run our script, as you can see, we only have apple, because right here we're checking for if x is equals to banana right before printing x. So now it's going to go ahead and check if x is equals to banana. For the first iteration, x is equals to apple. So this break statement will not be executed. So that's why we have our apple. But after the print statement right here, after printing apple, we then move to the next iteration, and in the next iteration, x is equals to banana. So when we check if x is equals to banana, which is true for the second iteration, that's why our break statement is executed without printing our banana right here. So this is the reason why we are having apple when we use the print statement immediately after our break statements. So I hope you understand the concept. And we can as well go ahead and use the continue statement. So let's go ahead and now use the continue statement instead of the break statement. So let's go ahead and say continue. And I believe you understand how the continue statement works from our previous video. With the continue statement, we're going to stop the current iteration of the loop and continue with the next. So therefore, once x is banana, it is going to skip banana and continue with the iteration. So it is going to now print apple, but skip banana and then go ahead and print orange. So now let's go ahead and run our script. As you can see, we have only apple and orange, but banana is skipped because we use the continue statement once x is equals to banana. Alright, so that's it for using the continue statement in for loop. And now we're going to go ahead and discuss about using the range function in Python. Let me actually go ahead and comment it out right here. So let me go ahead and say using the range function. Alright, go ahead and comment that line of code. Alright, there's a typo here, function. Okay, this should be function like so. Okay, so the range function is used to loop through a set of code a specified number of times. The range function returns a sequence of numbers starting from 0 by default and increment by 1 and ends at a specified number. So let me actually go ahead and show you how to use the range function. Let me actually go ahead and get rid of this. And then we're going to go ahead and say for x in, then we're going to go ahead and call our range function. And then we're going to go ahead and pass our range. Let's say 6. Alright, colon. And then we're going to go ahead and say we wanted to print x. Alright, so the range function right here, as you can see, we define a range of 6 numbers. So it's going to now go ahead and print out a range of numbers starting from 0 to 5. And now if I should go ahead and run our script, you're going to see we have a range of numbers starting from 0 to 5. Let me actually go ahead and expand this window like so. Alright, so the range function defaults to 0 as starting value. However, it is possible to specify the starting value by adding a parameter to the range. So let's go ahead and say we wanted to specify our starting value. We don't want it to start from the default, which is 0. So let's go ahead and do that. Now within our range, we're going to pass our starting values. So the first parameter should be our starting values. So let's go ahead and say we wanted to start from 2 to 6. And now our range is going to start from 2 to 5 instead of 0 to 5. Because right here we are specifying our own custom starting point. So let's go ahead and now run our script. As you can see, our range begins from 2 to 5. And the range function as well is default to increment the sequence by 1. However, it is possible to specify the increment value by adding a third parameter to our range. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and now specify our interval. By default, the range function increments our sequence by 1. So let's say we wanted to define our own custom increment. Say we wanted to increment our sequence by 2 or 3, for instance. So let's go ahead and do that. Now the first parameter right here defines the starting point of our range, and the second parameter defines the ending. So let's say for instance we wanted to end at 30, and then the third parameter is going to be our increment, our interval. So by default our interval is 1. Let's say we wanted to define our own custom increment or interval. Let's say we want 3 for instance. And now if I should go ahead and run our script, our range is going to start from 2 to 30 with the interval of 3. So let's go ahead and now run our script. Yes, as you can see, we start from 2, 5, 8, 11, 14, 17 up to 29. So as you can see, we have the interval of 3. Now we can go ahead and change it. Let's say the interval should be 2. Let's go ahead and run our script. It starts from 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Well, you get the idea. So this is basically how we go about using the range function with for loop in Python. Alright, and we can as well go ahead and use the else statement in for loop. So the else keyword in a for loop specified a block of code to be executed when the loop is finished. For example, let's say we wanted to print all the numbers from 0 to 5 and print a message when the loop has ended. So let's go ahead and do that. Now let's go ahead and now change our range value to 6, which is going to now print a range of numbers from 0 to 5. And then we're going to go ahead and define our else statement. Remember, we do not need an indentation to add an else statement to our for loop. So now we're going to go ahead and say else print. This should be our message when our for loop is ended. So we're going to go ahead and say finally finished. Something like this. So now we should have a message at the end of our range. So now let's go ahead and run our script. As you can see, we have a range from 0 to 5. And then right here, we have a message that says finally finished. And for your information, the else block will not be executed if the loop is stopped by a break statement. For example, let's go ahead and break the loop when x is 3 and see what happened with the else block. So let's come over here and say if x is equals to 3, go ahead and break our loop. So now let's go ahead and run our script. You're going to see that we have only a range of number from 0 to 2, but the else block is not executed because we break out of our loop before our loop actually ended. Alright, now let's go ahead and discuss about nested loops. So a nested loop is basically a loop inside a loop. Let me actually go ahead and comment it out. Let's go ahead and say nested loops, like so. So it's basically a loop inside a loop. Let me actually go ahead and minimize this a bit. Alright, let me actually go ahead and get rid of this. Let me comment this line of code and shift it down. Okay, so let's go ahead and define another loop. Let's go ahead and call it let me say adjacent. Let me go ahead and set it to a list of red, big, and testy. Alright, now let's go ahead and define a nested loop. So for the first loop is going to be for x in adjacent. Alright, and we're going to go ahead and then define our nested loop, our sub loop. So the second or the inner loop is going to be for y. Since we use x for the parent loop, so here I'm going to go ahead and say for y in fruit, colon, and then now we're going to go ahead and print our list. Let's say x comma y. And now let's go ahead and run our script. As you can see, we have our nested loop printed out. Red apple, red banana, red orange, big apple, big banana, big orange, testy apple, testy banana, and testy orange. So here what basically happened is the inner loop will be executed one time for each iteration of the outer loop right here. So that's why you can see we are having red apple, red banana, red orange 3 times, and then followed by big apple, big banana, big orange, and then testy apple, testy banana, and testy orange. So in this way, the inner loop is executed one time for each iteration of the outer loop. So in this example, we are simply printing each adjective for every fruit. So I hope that is very clear to you. And then we're going to go ahead and discuss about using the pass statement as well. So for loop also cannot be empty, but if you for some reason have a for loop with no content, put in the pass statement to avoid getting an error. So let's go ahead and exemplify that. Let me actually go ahead and comment this line of code entirely. Take them down a bit to get more room. Let me actually go ahead and define another for loop. Let's say for x in, let me define a set of integer values. Let's say 0 to 1, something like this, and then colon. So you cannot have an empty for loop. Now if I should go ahead and run our script, I'm going to run into an error. So if for any reason you have an empty for loop, you can simply go ahead and put the pass statement to avoid running into such kind of error. So now if we go ahead and run our script with this our empty for loop, we're not going to get anything because we haven't defined anything to be done within our for loop. But by putting the pass statement, we do not run into any error whatsoever. So friend, that will be it for this video. So we've discussed about for loop in Python. We've discussed that for loops are used for iterating over a sequence such as lists, tuples, dictionaries, sets, and strings. And we also learned about the range function and also nested loops. So I hope everything is clear to you and that you enjoyed the lesson, and I will see you in the next one.